Good evening. I'm Roman Moore, and it is time for our first in a series of political forums. It is 6:02 tonight. We will have the House District 61 race between incumbent Millie Hamner and the challenger Debra Irvine. And just to give you a little update, in case you don't know, House District 61 encompasses about 5 different county areas. There's Delta, Gunnison, Lake, Pitkin, and Summit. I assume nothing's changed, right, Millie?
That's correct.
Okay. And that's where we were sitting. We're sitting in Summit County. And the first few questions will deal with primarily our particular area here, maybe a surrounding county too. But what I'd like to do is start off with Millie Hamner and her bio, and then we'll move on to Debra Irvine's bio and go back to Millie for the first question of the night for this forum that we're doing tonight. Want to thank everybody for listening in tonight. We have Summit County Television also taping tonight, so you'll be able to see this online at summitnews.com, and you'll be able to see it on Channel 10, Comcast Channel 10, probably a couple of days is when it'll get played several times, and you'll be able to check the schedule for when it does come up. Right now, this is Millie Hamner's bio. She is the incumbent, a Democrat. She serves as the chairperson of the House Education Committee and sits on the Business, Labor, Workforce, and Economic Development Committee and Appropriations Committee. She is also the vice chairperson of the Interim Wildfire Matters Review Committee. During the 2014 session, she sponsored the Student Success Act and the Annual School Finance Act. These two bills invest nearly $500 million into K-12 education across the state. They include a $110 million buy-down of the negative factor, investments in early childhood reading programs, funding for English language learner programs, and the creation of 5,000 new slots for at-risk youth in kindergarten classes. In 2013, she sponsored the annual school finance bill, along with legislation to streamline childhood development programs, putting them under one umbrella and cutting down on administrative and government waste, and sponsored a bill to improve educator evaluation systems. In 2012, she sponsored the Colorado READ Act, expanding early childhood literacy programs. She has pushed for solutions to traffic congestion on the I-70 corridor and sponsored a bill to install a fire suppression system in the Eisenhower-Johnson tunnels. She began her career in Colorado public education as a teacher and administrator in the Eagle County School District, where she taught for 23 years before being asked to become assistant superintendent of the Summit School District and its 3,000 students. That was back in 2001. She was promoted to superintendent in 2004. She has a PhD in curriculum and leadership from the University of Denver. As an adjunct professor at both Adams State College and the University of Denver, she was involved in the planning and delivery of advanced degree programs for teachers and school administrators throughout Colorado. She is involved with the Summit Foundation, the Summit Lake Dillon Optimist Club, the El Pomar Foundation, and the Summit County Rotary Club. Debra Irvine has been married to Rob for 23 years. They have a combined family of 5 children. Her family has a strong military tradition that includes her father, her husband Rob, and her son, who is an Air Force captain and Air Force Academy graduate. She is a Summit Rotarian, past membership director, and member of the Rotary Literacy Committee, which directly helps Summit County schools. The committee recently introduced a financial literacy class, something Debra believes schools should add to their curriculum. Last year, she was elected to the board of directors for Club 20, an organization which follows legislation that supports the Western Slope. Debra represents the Summit County at Club 20. Debra has a bachelor's degree with a double major in history and government and graduate work in political science. She is proficient in 4 languages. Debra believes in and sees the benefit of total immersion for language instruction. She was the administrator and document security officer for a defense contractor working on national missile defense, also known as the Star Wars program. Debra was the administrator for a contractor responsible for the operations and maintenance of the U.S. Embassy in Moscow. She was a professional ski instructor in Garmisch, Germany. Her students consisted primarily of military personnel and their families. Debra has worked hotel inventory management for a resort community, and she was a personnel clerk at the U.S. Air Force Academy. She was the co-director of fundraising for the International School of Brussels. She's been a foreign language instructor, teaching German to military spouses. Her instruction included cultural awareness to prepare spouses for life overseas. She has also worked as a suicide hotline counselor for the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. She's been trained in reflective listening and notes that her work with the hotline is one of her most rewarding experiences. She is currently a professional artist in Breckenridge. Her work is featured in the Arts Alive Gallery at La Cima Mall, where she is a member of the Summit County Arts Council. She frequently donates her artwork for auctions. One of her donations last year benefited Friends of the Dillon Ranger District. Debra and Rob host a small concert at their home in the summer to benefit the Breckenridge Music Festival. Her membership includes the Summit Chamber and the Summit Independent Business Alliance. She strongly believes in the importance of volunteerism in our communities. And now, as we move on to the very first question, the most obvious question, which Millie Hamner will take a crack at answering, and then we'll go to Debra. Why are you running for the seat in House District 61, Millie?
Thank you, Roman, and thank you so much for hosting this forum again this year. Listening to you read my bio, I do need to make just two small corrections before I answer the question. And it reminds me that I need to make sure my bio is updated. But because of my work at the Capitol and around my 5-county House district, I did have to step down from Rotary and the Summit Foundation. So I just wanted to make that clarification to people who are listening who say, hey, I think she had to stop that. But anyway, to answer the question, I'm running because I think the Western Slope needs a hard worker and a strong leader. There are very few representatives on the Western Slope, and it's critical to have someone who knows how to work with other people, especially people on the other side of the aisle. Republicans and Democrats must work together to get the work done and to fight for what we deserve for our schools, for our roads, for our forests on the Western Slope. And so having served for 4 years at the Capitol, 2 years in the minority party, 2 years in the majority party. Through those 4 years of experience, I have passed successfully at least 42 pieces of legislation. Most of those pieces of legislation have been bipartisan with Republican support or Republican co-sponsorship, and I think that's really important. So I feel like I've accomplished a lot in the areas of the environment and the economy and education, but there's still a lot of work to do. And now that I know how to get the work done there, I'd be honored to have the opportunity to be able to continue that.
Thank you, Millie. And Debra, the same question. Why are you running for the seat in House District 61?
Well, I'm sure a lot of people are probably wondering, well, what is she thinking doing this again? There are people in our district who have said that they do not feel that they're being represented by our current representative, and we just cannot allow an incumbent who is driven by outside interests to go unchallenged. I come from a military family, and I am very proud of that, and we do believe that it is an honor to serve our country and also our communities. So I waited until the middle of February and thought somebody might step up, and no one did. And then I was asked to by several people. And that's one of the things that motivated me to run more than anything else, was that people felt like they were not being represented, from gun control bills. And I admire my opponent saying that she passed 42 bills. I think we have a problem when representatives feel that the number of bills that they're passing and that they have introduced is somehow indicative of the quality of bills that we have in place. Also, we need to start repealing, or we need to look to see if there's any redundancy in government before we start doing a little tally sheet. So that's why I'm running, and I'm honored to be the Republican representative.
Thank you, Debra. And the second question, I'd like to alternate on these questions, if I may. So as you catch your breath, Debra, I'd like to have you field this next question.
Okay.
And the next question is, what do you see as the biggest issues? Even though there are 5 counties here, we're going to focus on Summit and Lake County since they're nearest to our broadcast area. Mm-hmm. What do you see as the biggest issues in Summit and Lake counties? And how will you, or have you, addressed it? You'll have 93 seconds to answer for each county. You'll have that as a maximum. You can take as little time as you'd like.
Okay. Well, number one, in both of the counties, the economy is struggling, and especially in the rural communities, more than anything. We need to work on, in Summit County and in Lake, making sure that our businesses are not burdened with the regulations and mandates that they're constantly being burdened with. One of the health exchange bill that was passed and that my opponent voted for that created Obamacare in Colorado has seen the introduction of over 330,000 Coloradans have lost their health care coverage that they liked. People who have been suffering from diseases and their health plans have gone up, they've had them removed, or they've had their premiums increased. Education is always going to be an issue, and it isn't about how much money we're putting into education. It's about quality, and that's something that I hear from the constituents all the time. Vocational and technical education should be introduced because we want our children to be very well-rounded and also put them in a position that they'll be successful in the future. Additionally, water is going to be a constant. We can work on that. There is a water plan, and it is just that, a plan. And the legislators will be able to make some adjustments to it, but keep in mind that Summit and Lake and the rest of the counties in the district will have to conserve and find new ways of storage.
Thank you, Debra. And Millie, what do you see as the biggest issues in Summit and Lake counties, and how will you or have you addressed it?
Well, I think both in Summit and Lake, we have a lot of dead trees, and we've just got to really address that. I've been working really hard on the Wildfire Matters Interim Committee to carry legislation that not only supports our firefighters that we put at risk to protect our homes and our people living in our communities, but also to help homeowners make sense of defensible space and appropriate mitigation. Recently, I hosted a town hall with Commissioner Dan Gibbs to really look at some of the issues related to property insurance in the wildland-urban interface. And it's really very interesting. What we discovered is that it's really up to insurance companies to decide what they define as appropriate defensible space, which is that's their right. It's their company, and they're the ones that have to cover the risk. But I'm really committed to continuing that conversation with the Commissioner of Insurance to figure out if there's some way we can get the attention of insurance providers so that it makes a little more sense to homeowners as they try to do their mitigation. I've also carried successfully legislation that clarifies who's responsible for overseeing a prescribed burn, which really protects our firefighters. We don't need confusion at a time of crisis. Also, what to do in case a homeowner has their own firefighting company as part of their insurance package. So those, I think, are important issues. There are also issues in both counties related to the economy that I hope to be able to address. You said 93 seconds per county? Okay. And also education issues in both counties, Summit and Lake, that pertain to getting appropriate funding, supporting our teachers as they implement changes that we've put into state law recently.
Thank you, Millie. And as we move on to the next question, catch your breath, Millie. This
Okay.
will be you that'll field the next question as we alternate back and forth between these questions. The next question, what can the Western Slope do to protect its water sources, not only on a quality level, but on a quantity level, to ensure we do enough to not come up short for ourselves and do what we can to help others?
Right, that's a great question, and there have been a lot of conversations about this topic. I have been trying my best to be as involved as I can with all of these conversations. There's the Colorado River Basin Roundtable that meets every month. The Northwest Council of Governments Water Quality and Quantity Committee meets regularly, so I've been trying to stay as in tune with that as I possibly can. These are very big issues. I think the first solution is conservation. We all have to do a better job of conserving the water that we have, and that includes agricultural users, which are our greatest quantity users in the state. We have to continue to do everything we can. Senate Bill 23, which the governor vetoed from last session, was an example of an attempt to try to incentivize agricultural users to not, right now you use it or lose it. That's the way the water rights work. Senate Bill 23 was an attempt to encourage agricultural users to put their water that was not used back into the stream flow. I think that those conversations will continue. We really need to have tough conversations with the Front Range about conservation and about reuse of water. As we continue to develop the state water plan, there's going to be all of these basin recommendations coming together to shape one plan with competing interests. And I think we have to do everything we can on the western slope to protect our water and keep it on the western slope. If we do need to do more trans-mountain diversions, we need to be assured that the Front Range has done everything they possibly can with conservation and reuse.
Thank you, Millie. And Debra, what can the Western Slope do to protect its water sources, not only on a quality level, but a quantity level, to ensure we do enough to not come up short for ourselves and others who need that water?
The water plan is something that the legislators will be constantly reviewing and making adjustments to. Millie talked about the beetle kill and the forests that we have lost to beetle kill. This creates an environment of sediment, of mineral sediment that will be going into our reservoirs and going into our streams. We can also take advantage, since this creates a new watershed, we can take advantage of that and capturing the water and looking at different ways of storing it. The bottom line is the Front Range is always going to want more water. And there has to be conservation on all our parts, but especially on the Front Range. The Western Slope can't be responsible for opening the floodgates and letting water out. We had an amazing amount of snow and water. Who knows, maybe it's global warming. But we've had an amount of rain this year to capture that, to raise some of our reservoirs, maybe heighten them and height. General Hickenlooper spoke to that degree. In addition to being vigilant, when new developments start in the Front Range, they have to be responsible as well for storage and to come up with ways that they're going to provide water. And in addition, agriculture is one of our top priorities in the Western Slope, especially in our district. Another way that the ski slopes can take advantage of it, Buttermilk has a great half pipe that's made out of dirt and soil, and instead of using all the water, this may not be popular for the Vail resorts, but it certainly could conserve water that way.
Okay, thank you, Debra. And I believe Governor Hickenlooper was never in the military, so when you called him General Hickenlooper.
I did?
Yes.
Oh, Governor, well, maybe he thinks so.
And so I'm going to field this next question for you. You'll start off with this one. What, if anything, can you do as a representative for House District 61 to address housing issues for those least able to afford or attain home ownership?
Well, I think there were currently, and just recently, County Commissioner Dan Gibbs had introduced a plan for affordable housing. We have to keep in mind that property taxes, and when we put out mill levies time and time again, that does create an environment of bumping up the real estate and bumping up prices, especially on rent. I was in a bank not too long ago, and a young man was talking about, well, taxes don't affect me, and property taxes don't affect me at all. So I asked him whether or not he was in a rental house or if he purchased a house, and he said, well, no, I'm renting it, so what difference does it make? I don't own it. Well, the owners own it, and if they want to increase the rent, they can do that. So that's something to be addressed. Our economy is important, but I think that what was recently accomplished, I think was a good start, and I think we need to continue to pursue that.
Thank you, Debra. And Millie, what, if anything, can you do as a representative for House District 61 to address the housing issues for those least able to afford or attain home ownership?
Well, this is really an important issue because if we can't help people afford a home, we lose a sense of community. We see that when I was superintendent of schools here with the little school in Frisco. If we can't maintain affordable housing, we don't have families with children attending the school. And we see a similar situation in the Vail Valley, where the last couple of years they've talked about closing Red Sandstone Elementary because the kids don't live there anymore. And I happen to have taught there for 10 years, so I kind of track that issue. So at the state level, there was a bill introduced by Representative Duran this past year that addressed, and I'd have to look back to see specifically what it did, but it was intended to support affordable housing at the community level. But I think mostly what I can do is support the community efforts to this end. I know the county has done a great job, I think, with working with developers to create neighborhoods that are affordable. And as I've been knocking on doors and meeting families, I mean, it's just beautiful. The Wellington neighborhood, for example, I think is a great example, and the new Peak One development in Frisco. So I guess my question will be back to any towns or the county officials who might be listening. How could I, as your representative, better support affordable housing at the local level? And I'm all ears.
Thank you, Millie. And on to the next question. Catch your breath. You'll field this one to start with. On the issue of gun control and our Second Amendment right to bear arms, do you believe people who would use guns in the commission of a crime would not be able to get a gun if legal access to guns were restricted or outlawed? Please explain.
Well, I think that we can't stop every violent act, unfortunately. Quite honestly, I wish we could. But I think that we do have a responsibility for doing everything we can to make sure that criminals don't have easy access to guns. And that's why I voted for gun safety the year before last in the legislative session. Those bills were challenged this past session, and the challenge failed, so the bills still prevail. And as a result of those bills, we have evidence of about 1,300 people who've been denied access to purchasing a gun because they have been convicted of a serious crime, domestic violence, or a felony, or burglary or theft. And I think it's really the responsible thing to do. We've got to make it harder for criminals or people intent on evil to get guns. I think that's what Coloradans want to see us do. And I fully support everything that we can do to keep Colorado safer, especially, given the terrible tragedies we've endured with Columbine and the Aurora movie theater. People look to their elected leaders for help through these kinds of issues, and I know they're very difficult. But can we stop everyone who's going to do evil? No. But I think it's our obligation and our responsibility to protect our public and do everything we can to prevent violent acts.
Thank you, Millie. And Debra, on the issue of gun control and our Second Amendment right to bear arms, do you believe people who would use guns in the commission of a crime would not be able to get a gun if legal access to guns were restricted or outlawed? Explain.
One of the things that Representative Hamner said was legislators have a responsibility to make sure that our communities are safe. A state representative swears an oath to uphold two constitutions, the U.S. and the Colorado constitutions, both of which say that we have the right to bear arms. Now, the gun control bills that were passed were very controversial. And the people that I've spoken to, and you can see in the repeals of 2013, that it is a big issue. You cannot keep guns out of the hands of criminals. It's just not possible. If they want to, they'll have one. So I don't call these gun safety bills, they're gun control bills. And the majority of the people in our district have been very upset about it because we do have the right to bear arms. And there's one of the other things that people have said, when a state representative is just like anybody, they're a neighbor, they could be a superintendent, they could be anything. And for some reason, some of them, when they go into the legislature, they believe that because they were elected to office, that somehow they now have the right to take away the rights of other individuals. So this is going to be an issue. It's going to continue to be. But can a criminal and someone who wants to perpetrate a violent act with a firearm do so? Absolutely, even if there are gun laws in place.
Thank you, Debra. And catch your breath. You'll field the next question. The next question is dealing with health insurance. Health insurance costs have increased for most people, especially those that live in the mountains and resort communities. Even with the recent restructuring of the so-called zones, which have helped, costs may increase with higher deductibles on the horizon and certain requirements, like to carry maternity coverage when it's impossible to get pregnant, whether it's a male that has to have it or maybe a female that just can't get pregnant. How do you fix broken parts of something like that that obviously just don't seem to make sense? Debra?
Well, if I had the answer to that, I probably wouldn't be running for state representative. I probably would be running something a lot higher than that. This is a very complicated issue. And my opponent did vote for the health exchanges for Colorado and then voted against the repeal of Obamacare in Colorado. This goes beyond just these communities and how much people have to spend. We have businesses that are in the process of having huge burdens and financial burdens put on them. We don't even know what they're going to be until 2015. The families have been, I know of one family, that a family of five, they had a $5,000 deductible. Well, that was changed because of the health exchanges. That was changed to $5,000 per person. Now, this is $25,000 that this family does not have, and the business is on top of it. So how can we rectify it? You know what? I don't know. But I do know that there were women who were suffering from breast cancer. They had treatment, and they had doctors that they liked. They had the health insurance plan that they liked. And over 330,000 Coloradans lost their insurance. So it goes much deeper than that.
Thank you, Debra. And Millie, health insurance costs have increased for most people, especially the ones that live in the mountains, in resort communities especially. Even with recent restructuring of the so-called zones, which have helped, costs may increase with higher deductibles on the horizon and requirements to carry certain coverages like maternity coverage when it's impossible to get pregnant for a male or a woman who maybe has no ovaries, but they're still required to carry that. How do you fix this?
Well, again, I agree with Debra. These are complicated issues, but I took the charge and started working on these issues as soon as I started hearing from constituents about their dismay in how their prices were going up because of the new rating structure. And so the Western Slope legislators, Republican and Democrats, got together with the Commissioner of Insurance to make sure that she knew how serious this problem was. We hosted even a town hall in the Basalt area where she actually brought her staff and came and listened to a room full of people talk about how this had affected their lives. And because of those conversations and raising that awareness, we were able to effectively redo the zones so that when people go to renew their insurance next time, it will be more affordable. And I believe it's the same kind of process that we need to put in place if we are finding that businesses are incurring higher costs because of this expectation. Right now, there is a task force that's working to study some of these issues. Some of the issues around healthcare costs relate to the providers' availability. One of the things that I learned in working through this process is that Kaiser Permanente might have an interest in coming west on the I-70 corridor. So I think that having a little more competition might help us drive costs down. But those are the kinds of conversations that I've been involved in, that I will continue to be involved in, because I do believe strongly that everyone has the right to have affordable health care coverage.
Thank you, Millie. And we're about halfway through this evening. I'm Roman Moore. I'm the news director here at Crystal 93. I want to thank our candidates for being here tonight. Millie Hamner, the incumbent in House District 61, the Democrat, and Debra Irvine, the Republican challenger. I want to thank you for being here. I think it's very important for people to hear what you have to say, and hopefully the questions give them a little insight as to where you stand. And I think I know both of you personally well enough to where I like you, but this has nothing to do with a popularity contest in a sense. It has to do with, it comes down to really how you best represent the constituents' interests. And that's where I would encourage people right now that are listening and maybe watching. eventually as the videotape gets out online and it's shown on Comcast Channel 10 to take this as the template for your decision making and do a little homework. Find out what Millie and Debra, a little more about them and where they stand and what they've done or what they plan to do. Do the homework and make your decision based on an educated guess, not just because of something superficial. Now, as we go back to the questions tonight, Millie, you just finished up with one, so I'm going to give this next one to you. 2 high schools in the Jefferson County School District had to cancel classes recently because teachers were upset about recent issues with pay raises, and there was other issues associated with that, but that was one of the primary ones. So they called in sick last Friday. What are your thoughts on that kind of action?
Well, Roman, I have been following the issues in Jefferson County for the last several months, actually. I get a regular update on education issues going on around the state, and it is really troubling. There seems to be just a lot of unrest, some of it just related to change in leadership and on the board and with the superintendent. I have to say it's very troubling. I mean, parents send their kids to school because they want them to be with their teacher and learning. And so this is a really tough issue. I would say that there are better ways to solve problems. Throughout my career, I've served on both sides of the negotiating table. In my early years as an educator, I was the president of the Education Association in Eagle County. And then as I ended my career as superintendent, I was on the other side of the table bargaining for the district and representing the district's interests. So I've been the employer and the employee. And I firmly believe in that process of sitting down, talking, working through issues. That is how we get things done. And we need to do everything we can to make sure that children can go to school and their teachers will be there in the classroom. But having said that, and I'm not in the district, so I don't know firsthand what the specific issues are, but I do understand that the teachers are very disturbed because they believe that they are being censored. And I think that is a really tough issue. I think their actions are calling attention to the issue, and my hope is that this draws people back to the table to solve the problem immediately.
Thank you, Millie. And Debra, the same question. 2 high schools in the Jefferson County School District had to cancel classes recently, last Friday, as a matter of fact, because teachers were upset about recent issues. One of those had to do with pay raises and how that was determined, and also a curriculum issue. So they all called in sick, not all, but quite a few called in sick, enough to where they had to cancel those classes. What are your thoughts on that kind of action?
I have a very simple answer to that. I think it's sad that any time anyone has grievances with their employer and with the business that they're in, that they choose to go away from their responsibilities. That said, I'm not going to judge these teachers, and teachers are an amazing part and an important part of our community. And I really don't think that these teachers that are striking represent the majority of teachers by any means. I think they represent a minority, and I hope they work it out.
Thank you, Debra, and catch your breath there. You'll have the next question. While CDOT has made strides in alleviating traffic congestion on the I-70 corridor, do you think they're doing enough? If not, what do you think should be done?
When I ran 2 years ago, one of the things I mentioned was to widen the shoulder and create an additional lane. I think they've been working hard at creating a better process and a better corridor, especially on I-70, the Twin Tunnels project. If the economy improves, I mean, we're always talking about funding and finding more money so that we can put it into infrastructure. And if the economy does improve, then we have more revenue coming in. So that's something that we have to keep on the forefront. We have to stop going in the direction of constantly monitoring or sitting down with a committee. I think the one CDOT got together, the one plan that they were looking at took over a decade and millions of dollars. And they have to put a timeline to this. Privatization, I think, is really important. I've talked to different businesses, sand and gravel, paving companies, and we have got to start working between the public, the private, and the state to work on a project as quickly, as efficiently, and at the least amount of money that we can.
Thank you, Deborah. And Millie, while CDOT has made strides in alleviating some traffic congestion on the I-70 corridor, do you think they're doing enough? And if not, what do you think should be done?
Thanks. I-70 is critical to Summit County tourism and beyond. We have got to do everything we can to keep the highway open. And to keep it safe for people traveling. Because I'm on I-70 a lot, and so is Ray Scott, a Republican representative from Grand Junction. He and I often work together on solutions for I-70. And again, I think that's how problems get solved. I recently attended a meeting that was hosted by the Hotel and Lodging Association because they were starting to feel the pinch with their businesses. People were are starting to shorten their stay because they're worried about getting down to DIA because of traffic and construction. But the question is about CDOT. CDOT was a player at this meeting, and they outlined in great detail everything that they're doing to keep I-70 open. And they never have had to close I-70 because of weather. I-70 gets closed because of accidents. So what I think we need to do is continue to figure out what we need to do with mitigating accidents. One of the things we're finding is, the drivers want to blame the semis. Well, the semi-truck drivers also blame the drivers who are driving on bald tires who cause the accident, and then the truck spins out or jackknifes. So one of the ideas that I have moving forward, in addition to the work I've done with short-term solutions that I think ended up in the Twin Tunnel expansion and the fire suppression system being in place next summer in the Eisenhower-Johnson tunnels, is to look at where do the accidents happen, how can we make that stretch of I-70 safer, maybe with federal general fund match in revenue, but also how do we make sure that our motorists traveling on I-70 have appropriate snow tires? So,
Thank you, Millie. And catch your breath, and you've got this next question to start off with. And that question has to do with taxpayer money. Colorado has spent $8 million in taxpayer money on new compressed natural gas vehicles, with dozens of them stationed in places where there is no compressed natural gas filling stations. Because of that, state workers apparently continue to run many of them on more expensive gasoline, thus negating the environmental benefits and cost savings. Now, these vehicles, which are new, cost $7,000 to $11,000 more than comparable vehicles, gasoline vehicles, comparable gasoline vehicles. Since retrofitting existing vehicles can be done at a fraction of the cost, why wasn't that done?
well, this is one of those, an example of how we just got the questions before the show. If I'd seen this question before, I would have done a lot more research on the issue. But to my knowledge, all of the state fleets have converted. So I don't know if we just are not talking about the same issue. But this would be an area where I would need to delve in a little more deeply to find out if there are some state vehicles that haven't. Why haven't they? Because I have been informed that they have all been converted. So it could be that some of the vehicles we're referring to are maybe county vehicles. So I would need some better understanding of the problem, and I would agree that it doesn't make sense.
Thank you, Millie. And Deborah? Colorado has spent $8 million in taxpayer money on new compressed natural gas vehicles, dozens of them stationed in places where there is no compressed natural gas filling stations. Because of that, state workers apparently continue to run many of them on more expensive gasoline, thus negating the environmental benefits and cost savings. These vehicles cost $7,000 to $11,000 more than comparable vehicles new. And since retrofitting existing vehicles can be done at a fraction of the cost, why wasn't that done?
As Millie, I'm not familiar with this, the details on this at all. But what comes to mind, the first thing I saw when I was reading it, I thought, Colorado, it says, has spent $8 million in taxpayer money. That's where we have a problem. When monies come in and it's not yours, and you're spending somebody else's, it's so much easier to look at it less efficient ways, perhaps, not really recognizing the costs. And that's one of the reasons why when we talk about being a representative, and true representative government comes from looking at the fact that these funds that are coming in, that taxpayers are paying into the general fund, are paying into the state. And it's our responsibility as legislators to find a cost-effective way and to keep in mind that this money came from hard-working families, hard-working individuals, and we need to focus that way. I don't know. I guess my question would be, have we ever known the government to do anything as cheaply as possible or as efficiently?
Thank you, Deborah. And catch your breath, because you'll have the next question that I'll be asking, and which will be our final common question. I have a list here of common questions that both candidates get asked. And then I ask each candidate one specific question to them, and then they will have the opportunity to ask each other a question, and there will be a closing statement. And that's how we'll roll tonight on the first in a series of live radio political candidate forums. You're listening to Crystal 93, and it is House District 61 that we're focusing in on tonight. The two candidates, Millie Hamner, the incumbent, a Democrat, and Debra Irvine, the challenger, who is a Republican. And we've done this before. It was 2 years ago, I think, in this very room, that both of you were right here talking about many of these. And there's a few new issues that have come up. So I thank you for being here again to address this and helping to enlighten some of our listeners and viewers. And speaking of viewers, Summit County Television is in the studio videotaping as we do this forum tonight. So you'll be able to see this at a later time. It will be available at summitnews.com, so you can go online to view it, the video online, summitnews.com. And also it'll be replayed on Comcast Channel 10. So you'll have a chance to not only hear it all again, if you're listening right now, but you'll also have a chance to see it. And if for some reason you know people that are missing out on hearing this right now live, do let them know that they'll have a chance to see and hear this courtesy of Summit County Television, summitnews.com online, or Comcast Channel 10. The final common question, which I'd like you to think about very carefully, as all the other questions should have been also, but there is a large segment of unaffiliated voters in Colorado. In fact, the last time, unless something's changed, it seemed to be pretty even across the state, within a percentage point or two, maybe three, Democrat, Republican, and then those who didn't claim to be in either party. They might have been independent, they might have been libertarian, they might have been constitutionalist, whatever, but they were in that category, that third category of unaffiliated with a major political party. They just don't align themselves with the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. And yet they do make a big difference in elections. We've seen that over the years in Colorado. Colorado is a very independent thinking state, and sometimes the cycles come and go. Sometimes it's more conservative, sometimes it's more liberal. It just depends on the years and the issues. So this year, in 2014, what can you say to convince them they need to vote for you if you're a Democrat or a Republican and they don't align themselves with the Democratic or Republican Party?
Well, unaffiliated voters have taken on the choice of not aligning themselves with a party. And on that, I think we need to talk about principles and what a Republican candidate stands for, and this, in particular, this candidate, what I stand for. When we talk about principles, if you believe that we will prosper through free enterprise, by decreasing harmful regulations for businesses, by lowering taxes. If you believe that we can prepare our children for their future with quality education and choices, and choices to include choices for our teachers, our children, and their parents. Vocational and technical education is important to provide a well-rounded student, and so that they can pursue the dreams that they have, no matter what they are. And lastly, if we want to protect our heritage and our way of life, and that your representative swears an oath to uphold the U.S. and Colorado constitutions, then these are the principles that we can apply in every county in our district. And these principles, if they apply to you, if you believe that we can prosper and we can prepare our children, we can protect our rights, then I would be the candidate of your choice.
Thank you, Deborah. And Millie, the same question. There is that large segment of unaffiliated voters in Colorado. They just don't align themselves with the Democratic Party or the Republican Party for one reason or another. And there are certain disadvantages when they do that. Primaries is one area I can see there might be a disadvantage in. What can you say to convince them that they need to vote for you as a Democrat or Republican?
Well, the unaffiliated voters are not just in Colorado, it's the majority of the voters in House District 61. So it's a great question, and what I've been doing is voter outreach, where I'm actually reaching out to this group of unaffiliated voters, either in knocking on their door or calling them, to let them know that what we do at the Capitol in Colorado is not Washington, D.C. And quite honestly, I don't blame a lot of people for not committing to either party, because if they think what's going on in Colorado is like what's going on in Washington, D.C., I probably wouldn't affiliate either. What these people need to hear is that this is Colorado, we work together, and we get work done. And I give them specific examples of what we've been able to accomplish working together in education. We've been able to, with bipartisan support, increase funding without raising taxes this school year by nearly $500 million. As far as the environment, we've been able to work with bipartisan support to incentivize the use of dead forest timber to reduce the amount of fuel in our forests. We have been able to work together to support tourism and the tourism industry. So that's what I tell the unaffiliated voter. You know, if you want someone who knows how to work well with others, can get real results in a bipartisan fashion, find real solutions for Western Slope, Colorado, then they should vote for me.
Thank you, Millie. And that takes care of our common questions. Right now, I'm going to ask each candidate a specific question to them. And this question, I'll start with Millie, who has just finished answering one. We've heard some of what you have touted as your successes, being the representative in House District 61. What do you consider some of your failures? And when I say failures, to where they were failures maybe on a couple of different levels. Maybe it was a failure because you just weren't aligning yourself with the constituency, or it's something that you felt was right, but it just didn't go through, but you're not giving up on it. So it was a temporary failure, but you'll go back to it. Can you expand on that? And you'll have 2 minutes.
Oh, wow, good, because I have a lot of them. Because that's how we get success and results, by having some failures too. And I've always believed that we learn a lot by failing and picking ourselves back up again. Where to start? Okay, well, this year I carried 2 bills that didn't pass. And I quite honestly talk more about the bills that did pass. But one of them had to do with clarifying the county authority with agricultural burns in the situation of a red flag warning day. And it became politicized. It became more of an argument between the agricultural community and the firefighting safety community, and I kind of got in the middle of that. And so we're still somewhat unclear. Some counties believe that they do have the authority to restrict agricultural burns, and some don't. So I'm trying to seek some kind of affirmation of whether, what the ruling is from the Attorney General's office, rather than carry legislation to clear that up. Another bill I carried this year that failed had to do with trying to address the issues related to too much testing in our schools today. And it's a real issue. And the bill that I had agreed to carry, it's actually started in the Senate, would have eliminated the need to do social studies testing. And rather than go piecemeal and just cut out one area of testing, which really irritated the social studies people, because a lot of people believe that it doesn't get taught unless it gets tested, which I would argue a little bit with. But rather than do a piecemeal solution to a bigger problem, I supported House Bill 1202, which has put in place a task force that's meeting this summer to deal with the issue of, is there too much testing? How much testing is going on? For what purposes? And that group will be making recommendations to the legislature about a thoughtful approach to reduce testing. Another issue I got way behind last November was Amendment 66, and that failed. And I learned through that effort that we need to regroup, come back to the table, and figure out another solution for education funding in Colorado.
Thank you, Millie. And Debra, this will be somewhat related to that. Your question has to do with your failure to get elected 2 years ago. So your question is, because you were rather soundly defeated percentage-wise in 4 out of the 5 counties. One county, it was an unaffiliated voter or a candidate that actually got the most because she was from that area. Other than that, Millie Hamner got the majority of the votes in 3 out of the 5. You did take one of those, and that was the Delta area. So because of that defeat 2 years ago, what are you doing this time, 2 years later in 2014, to prevent another defeat?
Well, last time we had 5 people in the race. I don't recommend it to anybody. It's really hard looking over your shoulder anyway to see what your opponent's saying, and when you have 4 opponents, it's even more complicated. One of the differences this time is my opponent, Representative Hamner, has a voting record. And when you have a voting record, it's a whole lot easier to run as the challenger. And I appreciate you calling me the challenger all the time. I respect that, and I like that title. We have, from gun control bills to Amendment 66, Amendment 66 was a huge failure. And one of the things that there was a Bill 1120 this year that was introduced that would have amended the Senate bill that Representative Hamner had introduced that put Amendment 66 on the ballot. But every single county in our district voted it down. And she wanted to continue on the ballot. Now, this is someone who is not listening, and that's why I'm running again, because I've had people come up to me and they are disturbed. They are upset. I don't want them to be disenchanted. I want them to realize that they do have an option. And the representative who is pretty much a one-issue representative is not going to help our district. And I will not be that. I am not one who will be specifically focusing on education, which is important. But there are so many issues that are equally important in our district, and every single county has one. So there are not 4 or 5 people in the race. My opponent has a voting record, and we are going to have her defend herself, and I'm not going to defend myself at this point.
Thank you, Debra. And Debra, catch your breath, because at this point, we will go on to the questions that you ask each other. Debra, you will start off, and Millie will have 93 seconds to answer the question you have for her.
Okay. Let me turn this around. Proposition 104 is on the 2014 ballot, and that would open school board meetings at which teachers' unions and other employee groups collectively bargain with school boards. Teacher salaries and benefits make up the bulk of school district budgets. Since these are funded by taxpayers, don't you agree that the taxpayers should see how those decisions are made?
Well, thank you for the question, because we haven't really talked much about the amendments and the propositions that are on the ballot this November. And Proposition 104 will most likely pass, is my hunch, because the way it's phrased, it looks like it's just more transparency. This is a question for the voters to decide. Personally, when I've been involved in collective bargaining, to put that out under public scrutiny probably is not going to result in the best outcome.
Why is that?
Because collective bargaining is the formation of relationships between people. And I think that process will probably be compromised. But again, this is a vote, that's put out to the Colorado voters for their. I would definitely follow what the voters say on this one. I just say from personal experience, I don't think that results in the best outcomes for employees or employers.
Thank you, Millie. And Millie, your opportunity now to ask Debra a question. And Debra, you'll have 93 seconds to answer Millie's question to you.
Great. Okay. On your website, you say that you oppose the Common Core, which is Colorado's revised academic standards. And you have a quote that says, Coloradans know what's best for our educational system. But in developing the revised academic standards, the process involved hundreds of teachers and principals and school leaders and school board members. So my question to you is, what do you know about the Colorado academic standards, and what would you change?
What I do know is that Colorado school districts should have greater autonomy. And one of the things that you mentioned was testing, that you think that they're testing too much, and this possibility that they're testing too much. And there was recently a question posed to teachers throughout the United States. And they asked, with regard to testing, how much time do you think you spend preparing children for tests, administering the tests, and then following up?
Excuse me, I was talking about the academic
And
standards.
they said 55%. So 55% of the time. They want to spend 5% of the time. Now, I think we should go back to the Common Core because it is a federal program and it should not be implemented throughout Colorado. A lot of the other states have rejected it. It does cost a lot. It puts more funding has to go to education because of that, to implement the testing, to implement the programs, the books, and I think there should be greater autonomy at the school districts, but every school district is different. They have different demographics. What works in Delta County doesn't necessarily work in Summit and doesn't work in Lake and may not work in Gunnison or Pitkin. So I think that's what we need to start considering, is giving the school districts a lot more time, a lot more effort, and see what works best for them, instead of having a federal program come in and say, we really want you to sign up to this and sign up for this and implement it in your schools.
Thank you, Debra. And we're down to the final few moments of our candidate forum tonight on Crystal 93. Closing statements. Debra, you'll have 93 seconds to give your closing statement, starting now.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm challenging my opponent because someone has to. This election is about trust and about true representative government. My opponent has received a maximum personal donation of $400 from Mayor Michael Bloomberg. Amendment 66 would have been a $1 billion income tax increase every year forever. And it was supposed to be for education, but there was no guarantee that it would go directly into the classrooms. I have to say that Representative Hamner has an education retirement package of 6 figures. And because of this, she has a vested interest in making sure that para is well funded. This election is not about me. It's about the families that are trying to make ends meet. It's about businesses that find themselves struggling with regulations and mandates that are hurting them. It's about parents that want their children to be well prepared for a future of success. I have to say, our rights, our heritage, our way of life, the very things that have founded this great nation are at stake. I ask you to go to my website to learn more about me. I also ask you to learn about my opponent's voting record. It's irvineforcolorado.com. It will be an honor to be a representative, and I am asking for your vote.
Thank you, Debra. And Millie, your closing statement, 93 seconds,
Well,
please.
thank you, Roman, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk just briefly about my voting record. And one of the things I do pride myself on is bipartisanship, working together with the Western Slope to advocate for our schools, our roads, our forests, and I have a history of success there. With Amendment 66, I admitted that is in my failure category. But what I am committed to do is finding solutions. Amendment 66 was the funding source for Senate Bill 213. And so what keeping it on the books means is that we have 5 years to find a better solution to fund kindergarten, to fund at-risk preschool slots, to better fund English language learners and redo the whole School Finance Act. If Amendment 66 wasn't a solution, we have 5 years to find a better solution, and I'm very, very committed to doing that. As far as the academic standards, the whole intent there is to make sure that our children graduate from high school without needing remediation for college. If every individual district creates their own standards, I think we're going to have, well, that's what brought us to this problem, and that's what those academic standards are intended to do. Debra is attacking my retirement. I'm pretty much offended by that, but I will respond by saying I started as an elementary teacher earning $8,000 a year, and at the end of my hard-working career, I did have a high salary as a superintendent of schools. And I will say, if you look at superintendent of schools salaries, they are high. And I, for the last 5 years I was in the district, asked for no raise so that my money that would have gone through my contract to my salary went to the school district. And I think that people who work hard in a public employee system and pay into that system have the right to have a good retirement. So I'm fully committed to continuing the work that I've started, and thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Millie Hamner. Thank you, Debra Irvine. I do appreciate you being here, and we have run out of time. Like I mentioned before, you can see this online at summitnews.com shortly, and you'll be able to watch it on Comcast Channel 10. So I do encourage you to tell your friends, your neighbors, and remember that democracy is a participant-type sport. It's not something you sit on the sidelines and do and watch everybody else do it. Do talk about it with your friends, your neighbors. It's okay if you don't agree on everything. We don't. Our founding fathers never did. But you know what? Just respect each other and each other's opinions, and the best choices usually come out like cream rising to the top. Debra, Millie, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Roman.
And
Thanks,
participating in this first in a series of candidate forums live on Crystal 93.
Colorado's finest rock is on Crystal 93, 93.9 in Summit County, 93.1 in the Vail Valley, and 92.3 from the top of the Continental Divide at Loveland Ski Area. KYSL Frisco, K226AH Frisco, K222BQ Graymont. This is Crystal 93.